Welcome to Face the State. I'm Ariana Bennett. Thank you for joining us. Well, keeping Lake Tahoe blue is a multi-million-dollar year-round effort. It involves local and state governments, nonprofit organizations, and residents. But in 2017, that famous clear water had the worst clarity rating in the lake's history. Jim Lawrence with the Nevada Department of Conservation and Natural Resources is here to talk about that. Jim, thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
No, it's good to have you. Unfortunately, talking about something that's kind of a bummer, most recent numbers for Lake Tahoe's clarity really not good.
Well, the 2017 numbers, as you stated, the average annual clarity number is the worst on record at 59.7 feet. I think there are a number of factors that go into that, and it's very interesting what folks don't realize is that the clarity number is really a number that fluctuates on a daily basis. So when we're talking about the average clarity, this is basically an average throughout the year, 26 different data sets, and average to this 59.7 feet, which is disappointing for all of us that love Lake Tahoe. But the good news is that there's programs in place to make the Lake Tahoe resilient and to be able to bounce back.
Right.
What is really interesting about the data is that even though the average annual clarity was the lowest, when you look at the individual seasonal data, for instance, summer data, which is usually when the clarity is at its lowest, it wasn't the worst for the summer. And when we look at our winter readings, the winter readings was actually improved over 10 feet over the worst readings for winter. So it's the average annual clarity that showed the low number, but overall we are seeing signs that the lake is resilient and that we have programs in place to help improve and restore Tahoe's fabled clarity.
So basically by what I'm understanding here, it sounds like then if there were big time, portions of time where the water quality was fine or good, then there must have been some portions of time in order to get that average that had to be really bad to average at this low rate. And so the question is why then were we getting those low lows? Right,
and that's a great question. In 2017, we had a series of sort of weather events or weather patterns that were not necessarily typical and actually unusual, particularly when you look at it cumulatively. When you look at 2017, that historic winter just about, up at Lake Tahoe, and on the Nevada side, we had about 300% over average. So it was, as we all remember, it was a very large, epic winter. On top of that, we had about 50 atmospheric rivers, rainstorms basically. When you get the rain on the snow, you're going to get sediment going into the lake.
Right.
And this is on top of 5 years of drought. So on the drought, you don't have the vegetation, you don't have the watersheds as stable. And so those conditions, plus the hottest summer on record, led to a very unique situation. And when we talk to the scientific community, they're the ones that are kind of pointing at this weather pattern as being unusual. And so also gives us hope that our projects and programs are the programs that we need to have in place to help restore the clarity.
Right, and boy, that winter really wreaked some havoc in general on a bunch of different things because it was so unusual that it created some situations that we've never seen before and very possibly won't see again. But that does make sense, I guess, if you've got all that dry sediment and not the plants holding it down, and when you get all that runoff, it just goes straight into the Tahoe Basin.
Right, and that's absolutely correct. That being said, it is a number that we have to take seriously, the lowest clarity rating. So what we've done in partnership with California, my department, the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, co-chairs along with the California Natural Resources, the Science Council for Lake Tahoe. And so we've issued a letter to the Science Council, excuse me, for them to take a real close look at this clarity number and one, confirm, was it the weather that really caused these patterns, or was it the weather plus something else? Are there other factors that were contributing to this? If there were other factors, how should we modify some of our programs? And also to maybe take a look at the weather patterns and see and maybe predict, was this really an anomaly in 2017, or is this something that we're going to be seeing more of as we go into the future?
Right. So if not these weather-related reasons that you mentioned, what would be the other causes of, bad clarity, like this?
Right. The number one cause for bad clarity is really sediment. And if it's not coming in through the streams, which is really a natural process, because of the legacy development of Lake Tahoe, a lot of the sediment is delivered into the lake through the road system, whether it's the highways or the streets, or even erosion coming off of road cuts. When you're driving up to Lake Tahoe and you're on the highway, you can see many of the bare road cuts where the erosion can come off of. So that historically and currently is really the biggest deliverer of sediment into the basin, regardless of climate. And the good news is there is a multi-million-dollar environmental improvement effort, like you talked about in your opening, that is a partnership between the two states, federal government, public agencies like the local governments, as well as the private sector, with multiple programs to enhance and restore the Lake Tahoe Basin. With stormwater, over the years, with this partnership, we have basically restored or retrofitted for stormwater about 730 miles up in the Lake Tahoe Basin. I look at this as, in some ways, correcting some of the sins of the past. When development occurred in the basin, these probably should have been put in at the beginning, but it wasn't something that we were looking at when we developed. And so we're going back in, we're retrofitting, it's a strong partnership, and we're making significant progress towards that end.
Yeah, I know that, you know, for a while there, the water clarity at Tahoe was declining, and then was it right around the 90s where they decided, okay, we got to do something about this, and then kind of turned it around, and then that's when it started to improve?
Yes, that's absolutely correct. Up until about 1998, based on the clarity readings, on average, over that 20 to 30 year time frame, Tahoe was losing about a foot a year of clarity, on average. Around 1998 is when the environmental improvement program started, and based on a lot of the projects, whether it's stormwater or forest health or stream restoration, we have seen a stabilization of that clarity decline. So we're no longer losing 1 foot on average per year. In fact, even with this last reading, the 5-year average is still at 70 feet, which is better, much better than last year's reading, and certainly better than the 80s and the 90s when we were losing 1 foot per year.
Right, and just for clarity's sake, it is interesting if you haven't seen how they do the clarity count. They take, unless they've changed it, a disc basically that they drop into the water, and when you can no longer see it, that's when the clarity. That's how they get the depth.
That's absolutely
right.
Right.
It's just kind of an interesting thing.
Yes.
Like how do they get those numbers?
Right.
It's pretty cool stuff. Okay, so I think just for the regular user of the lake, a huge fan. Obviously, everyone loves Lake Tahoe in this region. It's an absolute gift. So, what are ways that we can all be better stewards of Lake Tahoe, and to help control this water quality issue?
Well, there's numerous things that people can do. We all love Lake Tahoe. It is such a special place, and I think we're all so fortunate to be so close to Lake Tahoe. Recently, transportation issues have been one of the largest emerging issues that have come about. As a result, our two states are putting together a bi-state consultation on transportation, really to reduce the congestion in the basin, because it is really kind of grinding up the dirt on the roads, delivering the sediment that is a problem, plus the atmospheric pollution that comes from automobile use. So one of the main things people can do is carpool. Whether you work in the basin or whether you're going up to recreate. Take a little bit of time, plan, and save some vehicle miles, and carpool up to the Lake Tahoe Basin is one of the first things you can do, or use public transportation. But in addition, if you're hiking and biking, stay on the trails. Going off the trails causes erosion. If you're on the beaches, whatever you take in, pack it out. Everything ends up in the lake because it is a basin. And also be very careful. Wildfire is a big concern, and if we lose our forests, we're going to even have worse of a water quality problem. 2 of our worst fires in the Tahoe Basin were human caused. One was a campfire that got out of control, and the other was a cigarette. So if you're up in the basin, enjoy yourselves, be a good steward, but be very careful and cautious at the same time. And then lastly, enjoy yourself, but be kind to one another. There are going to be construction projects going on to help improve the water quality. We will have foresters up in the Lake Tahoe Basin doing forestry work. Sometimes that can be inconvenient when you're up there recreating, but just know that all of that work is going to help keep Tahoe blue.
Now, we've got a couple minutes left, and obviously for aesthetic purposes, we want Tahoe to stay beautiful, but it's also an ecosystem that we're trying to protect. So if the water quality degrades, how would that impact the ecosystem?
Well, the water clarity is one indicator of the ecosystem, and it's an important indicator because it is sort of a metric on how the overall health of the lake is. It is our water system. It does feed down into the Reno Truckee Meadows area, and it's also the water system for the people that live up in the Lake Tahoe Basin. But there are also numerous other indicators that talk about our forest health or how well our stream zones are doing in our watersheds. Overall, it's a very complex system that actually has multiple indicators to it. The clarity is the most famous indicator, and it's something that we all relate to because Tahoe is such a beautiful place. But it is extremely important to protect that clarity. It's where we recreate, it's where we get our water supply. It's also very important for the economics of the region.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Jim, we have about a minute left. Is there anything else you would like people to know before we go?
Well, I would love people to know that every small bit counts. And so when you ask me about what can the average citizen do when they're going up there, please be mindful when you go up into the Lake Tahoe Basin. I would recommend folks, if they're inclined to go into their search engine and type in Take Care Tahoe. It's a wonderful website that tells what you can do to help keep Tahoe blue and preserve Lake Tahoe. There are wonderful community groups and stewardship groups that are doing great projects on a volunteer basis year-round. And that website will also have folks that, if they're interested in doing trail work or doing trash cleanup or improving watersheds, there's all the information where you can sign up and help Lake Tahoe.
All right, perfect. Jim, thank you so much for your time.
Great, thank you.
Sure appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right, well, coming up on Face the State, if you don't have health insurance, it can be really hard to find a doctor who will see you, and it can be especially hard to pay for it. But there is one medical center in Reno that can help, and they're expanding. We'll learn more about Northern Nevada Hopes right after the break.